All right, so 13 is my favorite number, and that's a true story. That's a snippet of biography from my life. What's my favorite number? 13. 13. Yeah. So it says on my favorite number example, for each of the following, write a sinusoidal equation in terms of both sine and cosine. So it doesn't say to make it positive or negative. We could choose, okay? But for each of these graphs, we want to write one in terms of sine, one in terms of cosine. So it's kind of like what we've been doing. The only difference is these graphs aren't quite labeled to the extent that ours are, right? If you have every point labeled, every critical value labeled, and you have your high point and midpoint labeled, then the values that you're going to need are right there in front of you. All you got to do is pluck them off the vine, right? So that would be the first thing I would recommend doing. Let's go ahead and add some detail to this map. Let's do the vertical axis first. I have a high point of 12, and 5 appears to be the sinusoidal axis, right? So from there, you can figure out the whatlitude, the amplitude, right? So let's go. We're going to need that for the equation. What would the value of A be? 7, right? It's 12 minus 5, which is 7. Would that allow us then to label this low point? It sure would. If the wave height is 7, I go down 7 from 5, it puts me where? -2. Okay, good. So now I have the 3 pieces of the vertical axis labeled: high, midpoint, low. I do have some work to do on the horizontal axis. I have a critical value at 2. That's good. And I have a critical value at 11. But that doesn't tell me much, right? It tells you plenty, exactly. So here's what I want to know. How far is it, first of all, from 2 to 11? What's 11 minus 2? Right minus left. Yeah, it's 9 units. Is that the period? It is not the period, right? If they had labeled this point over here, the next high point, as 11, then it would be from high point to high point would be 11. They're not giving me the full cycle. They're giving me a fourth of it. Good. Another fourth of it and another fourth of it. So I'll label it in green. So yellow, green, yellow, green. It takes 4 quarters to make a full cycle. Yeah. It takes 4 quarters to make a full WNCAA game. But it only takes 2 halves to make a men's NCAA basketball game. Same time though, right? Yes. So here's what I'm going to do. From 2 to 11, as Garrett said, is what fraction of a full period? 3/4. So 3/4 of the period is 9 units. Okay. Now you could probably also just partition it in your head. I mean, these are nice integer values. So if I solve for P by multiplying both sides by the reciprocal of 3/4, I get 9 times 4/3, which is 9/3 is 3 times 4 is 12. I know the period is 12. So that allows me, if I want, to label this point right here. Do I label that as 12? No, it's 12 units from 2 to the next high point. That would be 14, right? From high point to high point, that unit's 12. Now, from there, I could figure out what a fourth of the period is. That's a fourth of 12, which is 3. So there you go. That's the magic number. So now I can label this point here, not as 3, but 3 units from 2, which would be 5, and then plus another 3, that would give me 8, and then plus another 3 is 11, then 14. Okay, so see how we did that? You're always going to be given some fraction of the period. And if you can find that distance, set it equal to whatever fraction of the period you have, solve for P, or really solve for a fourth of P. You can do it in 2 steps. Solve for P, then find the fourth of P. And then you can go through and label all the way through. All right, so now it should be easy. Let's go ahead and do one in terms of sine. You want to do sine or negative sine? Doesn't matter to me. Sure. Negative sine? Negatives. Let's do negative sine. We'll do positive cosine. Okay. Let's do positive. What did I say? Negative sine. All right. So it's negative sine. Now I don't just put negative sine. The amplitude goes in there. What's the amplitude? 7. So it's negative sine of B times X minus something plus C or plus D. What's our D value? 5, right? 5. Now, the question I have for you is the period is 12. Do I put 12 in here? No. The period is related to the B value, but it's not the B value, okay? So remember, if I have the B value, I can find the period. It's 2 pi over the absolute value of B. But as I mentioned when we first did this, B is also 2 pi over the period. They can just trade places in that equation. So what is my B value? Well, it's 2 pi over 12, which is what? Pi 6. Yeah. We get B from the equation, or we need B for the equation. We get P from the graph, or we need P from the graph. All right, now that I have all that filled in, now it's just a matter of doing what we did previously. Let's go ahead and find where negative sign starts. So what are we looking for if I want a negative sign? Sign always starts on an axis, right? Remember that. Sign always starts on an axis. But because it's negative, we want it to be on an axis heading low, don't we? And that's at where? Negative 5. I'm sorry, positive 5. What? Right? Yeah. It's, yeah. My S's look like 5s. I just tricked myself. So if it's positive 5 on the graph, it's going to be X minus 5 in your equation. Okay. If you wanted to do a positive sign, you would have X minus 11, right? I'm not going to write that out. All right, let's do G of X then. We'll do, as promised, we'll do positive cosine. So it's still the amplitude of 7, but now it's cosine. B is still pi 6, but now it's X plus or minus something, something plus 5. Once you get the first one, the rest are easy. For a positive cosine, what are we looking for? Cosine always starts at an extreme, either a high or a low. Positive cosine then would be at a high point. And we have 2 locations, 2 and 14. Now let's just do 2. So is it X plus 2 or X minus 2? X minus 2. Yeah. So you can already kind of imagine like these being really good multiple choice questions on a test. And instead of having like pi 6 in there for the B value, I'll put 12, bless you, for the period. Or for the shift, instead of having X minus 2, I might have X plus 2, right? That's how I'll generate the wrong answers. If you wanted to do a negative cosine, you just shift over to 8, right? X minus 8. Everything else is the same.